Pirates. Who doesn't love pirates? Since I was a lad, I used to love them. It started with Captain Pugwash. Sadly, apparently, Seaman Staines and Roger the Cabin Boy weren't really the names of any characters, but hey. And then more recently, I got into the excitement of all the series of Black Sails, what it really meant for the average Brit taken out of a European context with no opportunity to a world where they could get whatever they wanted to, grab whatever they wanted to, and then get their heads blown off for gold and booty. Which is why I thought I would stick to the tabletop gaming side of it, just in terms of the health and safety aspect. And I saw that Firelock Games released a huge tome called Blood and Plunder with the most love you can possibly imagine for the period of the golden age of piracy. Though it did become quite clear to me after listening to the Empire of Blue Water, a fantastic audiobook all about Henry Morgan and the age of piracy, that talking about the golden age of piracy in those terms, about the sort of, whatever it was, the 1650s, 1660s to early 1700s, is kind of like talking about the 1990s and 2000s as the golden age of people trafficking, because these were not lovely guys. I mean, listening to this book, although effectively the blame, the main contribution for the rise of the pirates is placed at the feet of the Spanish, who take over the New World, refuse to trade with anyone, look down on everyone else, and basically create the pirate menace, because they would have been cleared out as just an annoyance to trade between all the European powers if trade had been allowed. The reality is that a lot of these pirates, they say, absolute power corrupts absolutely and everything, but a lot of them were just psychos from what the description goes. Whereas I must say in Black Sails, they're all painted as kind of, human beings striving towards kind of democracy and independent free will, away from the terrible restrictions of kind of a closed 17th century, 18th century society back in old Europe. But anyway, that's not going to stop us enjoying the colour and flavour of the period. And I haven't played it yet, but there is colour and flavour for the period in this book galore, so much so that this beautiful book, which is very well made, after not very long, just broke because the spine couldn't carry the weight of all the love. Now, a key upside of these rules is that they properly do build in a mechanism for ships, but I'm not going to go down that route initially. I mean, the ships are quite expensive. I understand they've got a Kickstarter, I'm not sure where it's at, which has plastic ships, but I'm not yet ready to spend 50 quid to 100 quid on a big ship, though one day. But one day, ooh, ships. Now, I haven't played this game yet, but a quick skim of the rules strikes me as being not too far out from most kind of modern era skirmish games. There's cards to, depending on what you pull from your deck of cards, a card, I think, for each unit. You work out who gets initiative, which units go first, so it's not an I go, you go game as far as I can tell. There's an action phase where you run around shooting people in the usual manner, attacking them, and then you've got different levels of unit, inexperienced, trained, and veteran. These are the actions which you'd recognise, I guess: move, charge, duck, shoot, reload, because obviously this is a black powder game. You can fight, you can rally, you can start a fire. Who doesn't want to be a wicked fire starter in the age of sail? There are distances for different weapons which you can understand. Scope for quite heavy guns potentially if you use the ships. And then what I like is a game which perhaps not as heavy as bolt action, but starts adding fatigues. The more you start running your dudes around, or the more scared they get. And then there seem to be quite extensive rules for ships, which, as I mentioned, I'm probably not going to get into yet. I think we'd all be familiar with the mechanics around building a force. There's a points limit. It looks like 150 to 200 is for a decent game. I wouldn't want a game going on for more than 2 hours these days. Select a commander and a faction. I mean, in terms of commanders, this game is fantastic. If you choose the Spanish or the English or the Dutch, each one has 5 or 6 little mini armies with their own flavor, depending on where they are in the Spanish Main and the politics behind them. And in terms of faction, initially I thought, who doesn't want to be the English? You get to it's kind of like in space, everything was so far away. It took so long to get to by ship that, the English would just pinpoint attack some poor Spanish town and raid it. And even though Spain was enormously powerful, by the time the Spanish got the right troops over there, it was too late. But in WhatsApping on the subject with the person most likely to play Blood and Plunder with me, they wrote this, which kind of tells you what cries out from the heart of every Englishman and why probably the nation voted for Brexit, even several hundred years afterwards. Which leaves me with the Spanish. But hey, what's wrong with that? I mean, yes, you probably aren't going to have your best guys in the right place at the right time, but, there seem to be... I like the look of this La Florida force option, where you've got soldados, Native American warriors, who can become core units, with the possibility for getting caballero lanceros, presumably dudes on horses with long sticks, to kind of flavour what would otherwise be militia. Milicianos is your core. I think you've got to have, I haven't looked it up properly, but I'm guessing that you need to have a number of core units in order to have a support unit, like on a kind of 2-for-1 ratio or something like that. But caballeria, you've got cavalry, milicianos, piqueros, pikemen, lanceros, which I'll come on to, but are dudes with these short lances who are proper guerrillas, and of course the militia. And did I mention that this rulebook has enormous love for the period, with vast numbers of commanders per faction? And is it me, or does this dude look like Alatriste? A kind of one of the Three Musketeers types, but Spanish. And so for the Spanish, you get kind of sailor, pikemen, corsairs, basic sailors, Christianized Indians, the militia, elite guerrilla lancers, and what looked like more kind of standard 17th century military fare. And I think this comes from the updates, the supplement, Blood and Plunder, No Peace Beyond the Line book, which has even more love and more different sub-factions and soldier categories and types. I think No Peace Beyond the Line is because there was a kind of rule, that Europe, in the European nations might have made peace with each other, but whatever happened in the New World happened. But coming on to building your force, so you've got your faction, you've got your commander, and you decide how big the units have to be, and the maximum minimum sizes seem to change depending on the scale of game you're going for. So I think, the smaller games, 2 to 4, but I'd be going for, I think the 200 mark, so it'd be 3 to 8, I think, as the basic unit. And it looks to me that if you're playing a kind of 200-point game, which is, up to 2 hours, you're looking at something in the order of, 30 to 50 guys a side. So what we've got going from right to left over here are various groups from different manufacturers, or the same manufacturer, different kinds of figures. So over here we've got a bit of a mishmash
of 7 Years War era, I suppose, 1740s to 1780s type characters by Wargames Foundry. And I thought, they're broadly suited to the age of sale and piracy. But does it really matter if they're not exactly right? Let's bring them all up for a bit of a family close-up over here. I think one is from a duel set and then from a hunting set. But, look at these. Aren't they gorgeous? I mean, he looks like some kind of English landed gentry gent. But, they could just be merchants with their servant giving them a bit of a refresher drink. Another gent coming over to say hello. I think that must be a poor soldier. It kind of looks like he's got a 7 Years War uniform. Left, with all of the amazing social nets that they had in those days to kind of fend for himself on the streets of London. A musician. Random lady lying in bed, looking like she's smoking something like opium. I don't know if they had it then, probably not. And then high-end lady over there. They look like they're from the court of Versailles. Another fat gent. Town crier. I don't know. Everyone needs an accountant, some kind of bookkeeper. A little man sitting over there considering poetry. And then at the back over there, which we'll bring to the front, these are the old school Foundry pirate musicians. Little Roger the cabin boy over there. I think he was called that in Captain Pugwash. 3 musicians. And a Sawbones, or ship's cook, painted awfully in about 1996. Well, painted very well for that day and age, not for now.
And it looks like you can sprinkle your force with these interesting little characters to add a bit of flavour. Captured merchant. They'll give you different kinds of advantages. All forces want to keep this model from becoming a casualty and capture it, if possible, to reflect this unit making a range attack against a unit that contains this model have a +1 penalty to the attack. That's interesting. Local guide. Gives you quick and scout. A spy. Great for those ladies of Versailles stuck out in Tortuga. Ship's pilot, and a spiritual leader. Hello, spiritual leader. We come here in the name of His Most Catholic Majesty, Philip or Carlos, whoever of Spain, to spread the word. And the word is burn, baby, burn.
Then the next group over here are a couple of War Machine characters who are clearly too steampunk for this, though perhaps not him. Maybe he could be some kind of huge oversized ship's cook or something. I mean, he's got some kind of steampunk rucksack, so he's clearly excluded, but it does mean that perhaps, if there were some kind of steampunk setting, I could use these. These are some Black Scorpion miniature elf pirates, but, you can't see any pointy ears, and so I don't see why they couldn't be pirates themselves. Maybe characters. We'll come to a moment and see how well they mesh in with the others. This group are almost exclusively Wargames Foundry pirates from back in the day, and let's have a close look first. So these would be freebooters, English New Worlders from all walks of life who master the musketry tactics of the old French buccaneer. They are skilled in all manners of combat, possessing notable proficiency with their muskets. And as I understand it, they're the ones who just singed the beard, not of Philip II of Spain, I suppose, but of whatever later kings they were, just randomly raiding bits of the New World in the Spanish Main. And these guys are supposed to come with buccaneer guns, which I think were the highest end musket you could get of the age, and standard melee weapons. And they get ball and shot, fast reloads, sailors and marksmen. And then you get veteran freebooters who are among the English buccaneers of Port Royal, the men of vast experience. They learn quickly how to adapt to the irregular style of warfare in the Spanish Main and Caribbean islands, armed with buccaneer guns, plug bayonets, pistols and cutlasses, as well as just being a bunch of psychos. It doesn't quite say that. They become amongst the toughest fighters in the New World. I suppose when they say they come from all walks of life, that's good, because I can't tell if this guy is like some kind of Bashi Bazook or something, or some kind of Balkan fighter, or Greek independence fighter against Turkey. I don't know, but I suppose, you know, in the age of sail, people got around. But these guys, I mean, they look pretty English to me, or North European, but there's no reason, I guess, if I think carefully about the colours of everyone's hair, why they couldn't be Spanish. Let's see what they would be if they were Spanish. If they were Spanish, they might be corsarios. These Spanish raiders are armed with well-made Spanish muskets and a vast knowledge of seamanship and ship-to-ship combat tactics. They are amongst the most elite Spanish troops to be found in the New World, and they have matchlock muskets. And they are ruthless sailors and swordsmen. I'm trying to work out why the English don't have ruthless, but the Spanish do.
Oh yeah, auto da fe, and nobody quite expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Or hostigadores. These militia troops specialize in scouting and hit-and-run tactics, often made up of mixed races. Spanish hostigadores sometimes put up resistance movements for years, such is the case in Jamaica, where they are a constant nuisance to the English. And you can upgrade people to blunderbusses, and these guys have what look like something where you just shovel in whatever bits of horrible metal you can find and go kaboom. He looks like he's some kind of French revolutionary, but you know, I suppose others must have worn those hats. These guys don't really have a role, I suppose, amongst the English. I suppose they could be militia pikemen, but that's not the obvious use for them. They're more suited to being one of the elite Spanish units, namely the marineros piqueros. The half-pike or lance is a common weapon aboard ships of the 17th century. These experienced sailors use them to great effect to repulse enemy boarding parties, as well as to break through defences when boarding enemy ships themselves. Lancers and standard melee weapon. Ruthless artillery crew and sailors. But actually, I think what I meant were the lanceros. These Spanish lancers are elite fighters who adapted the use of European pole arms to their dense Caribbean environment. Masters of ambushing and stealth, these guerrilla units move swiftly through any terrain and are notoriously skilled in melee. And interestingly, 5 points versus the milicianos piqueros, who are basically normal pikemen of this age, who are only 3. I mean, this cannon is a little bit sci-fi. I'm not sure anyone would have embossed a skull and crossbones basically onto there. canon. But, you know, what's wrong with that? Who will notice and who will care? One of the most fun parts of Blood and Plunder, to my mind, is that you can get all manner of characterful captains. And that's what we have over here. Clear Blackbeard contender. Quite like the look of him. Crikey, they haven't survived well after 20-something years. But a spruce up will do fine. I mean, look, in those days, who understood how to highlight? There was nothing to copy. These miniatures are Black Scorpion pirates, and there is an element of cipher from these. And whereas the Foundry pirates, to my untrained eye, look kind of 1650s to kind of 1690s, 1680s, these guys are generally wearing tricorns, which makes them look a bit more, well, a certain kind of tricorn that makes them look a lot more, 1700s up to the kind of French Revolutionary period. And here they are, zenithal highlighted, only because back in the day I used to undercoat everything chaos black and then realised you can't actually tell what's going on. And the reason these have got these 30mm bases is because I thought, you know, I initially used them for War Machine because they fitted in very nicely with the War Machine steampunk figures, and so they actually saw a few games around 2010 for War Machine, for one of the pirate factions, one of the mercenary factions. But the question is now whether they could fill the role. I think they've got to be English. They don't look Spanish in any way. And they would be sea dogs, who are English sailors, masters of seamanship. Life at sea made them rugged and surly. These guys look very surly. Pistols and standard melee weapons coming in at 4 points. Brawlers, experts, artillery crew, and sailors. So he obviously has got a musket. And would he fit in with these Foundry musketmen? At a stretch. I mean, you know, some people are much taller than others. Why not? They're all painted broadly in my style. I mean, I'd already put him over there. He's Black Scorpion. He looks a bit more commander-like, but, you know, he could just be the head honcho in a unit of musketmen, because on his back he carries a musket. I mean, there are loads of women here, which actually is fantastic in the scale department, because, you know, they scale even better with Foundry, because they're a little bit shorter. Whoops. And I think some of the ones who don't have hats, these guys look vaguely more Spanish, potentially. And the Spanish do have their own sailors, of course. There's the marineros. Spanish sailors are excellent seamen. Those from the Bay of Biscay are thought of as especially skilled and brave. Equipped with pistols, they are known to be deadly in a brawl. 4 points. Ruthless. Spanish, always ruthless. Artillery crew, poorly equipped, and sailors. So, you know, a few marineros there. And the question is, we haven't got too many normal sailors or marineros. But these guys, so that would be Foundry. That would be Foundry. And you can actually upgrade some of these guys with stink pots and, let's have a look. So the marineros and sailors, 1 in 8 can be given a sting pot. 1 in 3 can exchange their pistols for a blunderbuss. You saw the blunderbusses earlier. And you can even upgrade the pistols for a firelock musket, but you've got to pay 4 points for the wider unit, incentivizing you taking a bigger unit. And what's left over? So I mean, these guys also are screaming out to be piqueros, but annoyingly I think the minimum unit size is 4. But I could just add them to the guys with the full-blown lances. I mean, in these rules, what's the difference? If you're at the receiving end of that versus that, what's the difference? I mean, I suppose you can swing this around your head, but it can't be that wieldy. It must be more of a pokey thing. And I can't see any rules for someone just holding an axe. Now we're going to build in a little bit of an unboxing of some casting room miniatures, 1670s, War of the Spanish Succession miniatures. Now what does that have to do with anything, you might say? And the answer is
Spanish soldados or milicionados, the militia or proper trained European soldiers out on the Spanish Main.
Now, the thing with casting room miniatures is they seem to be separate from Wargames Foundry because they themselves took the view that these were just a bit wacky and below par. But, actually, largely, I think they're all right. And some of them seem to have distinct elements from the normal Wargames Foundry miniatures. In any case, like the heads of these look distinctly Mark Coppelson to me. So I don't know, someone just, a lesser sculptor just put the heads on and then sculpted around them, or whether this is just Mark Coppelson just knocking them out at speed. And so scale-wise, well, these are against the Black Scorpion miniatures, so they were never going to obviously fit in with those, but do they fit in with normal Wargames Foundry miniatures? Well, obviously, I would say they do. There's a whole load of them. So I've got 16 of these, and they are all different. Well, 8 are different. And there's a slightly different pack of 8 here, where they are not marching with muskets over the shoulder, or matchlocks over the shoulder, whatever these are. They're kind of more meandering through the mangrove swamps or whatever of Florida, not that I know. And don't they base up well?
As ever, thank you very much for watching to the end. If you like this, do click the like button. Do offer any comments. I'm open to any thoughts and suggestions. And subscribe if you want to see other videos I've done. And one day to see if I actually get around to painting any of this stuff. I mean, my opponent seems quite pumped, and so am I. So we'll see. And maybe one day there'll be ships.